As I started healing more from narcissistic abuse and could go back to being around people again, I began to meet up with some people from my pre-collapse life. I was pretty excited about it, especially because my levels of anxiety were really low, even lower than they had been before everything collapsed. It felt really good to be able to see them and spend time with them, because I missed them. But then I quickly realized that what I missed was the illusion of them, not the actual experience of being around them. We all create these illusions in our minds about people and other things, just to survive. The actual experience is very different from that illusion, but we are terrified of truly seeing that. When I went to meet these people from my more grounded, calmer emotional state, I was terrified by what I actually saw and felt. And this is what I am sharing in this series on narcissistic tricks in casual conversations, which you can watch from the playlist linked in the card above and in the description below. At that time, I started to understand that all my life, I had been lying to myself and living in denial, just like everyone else does. I was happy to see people, but when I was actually with them, it usually started off well and then the entire narcissistic game would begin to unfold on me. I didn't understand it back then, and in truth, it very rarely ever felt good. I made myself think that I liked it, that I enjoyed it, and after a while I even believed that. But my body and mind always knew that it wasn't nourishing, that there were always these little jabs, hits, and bites underneath it all. We are very good at learning what we should like and what we shouldn't, and in lying to ourselves about it. The people I was meeting live in a narcissistic world just like I did before, and they use all these tricks to survive in it. You cannot survive in that world if you don't use them. People use these tricks to protect themselves from other people, and to create an artificial, narcissistically supportive, safe microclimate of acceptance and love. A manufactured reality where they have control and cannot be devalued or hurt out of nowhere for no reason, like what constantly happens in this psychologically and emotionally torturous narcissistic game we call the world. They build a reality that protects them. That reality is coming from the force that indeed protects its workers the most and first created reality in which we are emotionally and psychologically and even physically terrified of one another, to then come to help us and protect us from people, which in fact is playing its puppets against one another. And we are terrified of one another, not without a reason. As you hear more and more and your consciousness levels rise, you will be shocked to see that all the struggle, all the exercise, all the run, all the work, all the achievement, everything you have done so far, is motivated at the root by the fear of people, of being rejected, ridiculed, ostracized, laughed at, humiliated, trapped in a definition of being weak, stupid, helpless, not worthy, bad, and so on. The entire rat race is based on that. When you let yourself really see why you would like to have a better car or better branded clothes, for example, or go to fancy places and hotels, or be really intelligent and have a great job with high status, it is all because these things protect you from people. In a narcissistic world, when you keep exhausting yourself for more, it means that you are not living from your purpose and you produce the life force energy for creating a narcissistic matrix. And because of that, until you are useful, you get the validation of the narcissistically programmed crowd. At least to a degree. Because then you start to see that whatever you do, you are screwed. If not here, then there. If you do good here and people give you some love and validation, you are hated and devalued somewhere else. This is how the narcissistic world operates and these are its roots. You never get truly nourished with human connections because there are no humane connections there, or only glimpses of them. And there is always devaluation waiting for you. A fascist axe is always ready to fall on your neck. It only needs a trigger. The other side of the coin is being awarded with the definition of being good and decent. If you stay with lack of your own thought and identity, and remain a part of the suppressed and tamed herd, the herd members often validate each other quite well and are united by silent hate toward those who left the herd. There is a lot of validation there from the narcissistic matrix structure, because in this case, you suppress your true self and you don't let it surface. And then you are rewarded for being useful, predictable, and safe for the system. But inside, your soul is starving. You only speak from a script that you believe is your own voice, but in reality, it's a carefully shaped role designed to support the narcissistic version of reality. Like being patted on the head for being a good girl or good boy, obedient, cooperative, agreeable, and you can live with that nice definition, because it grants you social safety. But inside, you're full of numbed pain. Pain that has no safe outlet. It leaks out while watching TV, politics, or social debates, as displaced anger, hatred, and frustration. But what you're really grieving is the pain of not being yourself, of having been suppressed so deeply that even thinking about it feels unbearable. You regret it more than anything, yet cannot bear to bring it to the surface. TV and politics provide only a facade, a show meant to stir us emotionally without ever truly changing anything. Yes, many of the problems they present are real, but the way they are shown is performance, and the way they are handled will never resolve them. These problems exist for a reason. They are useful in keeping us occupied, depleted, and under the spell of false hope. This is why, after narcissistic collapse, we often find ourselves lacking motivation or drive. Deep down, we know the game is rigged. We know now that nothing around us is what it seems, and we lose interest in trying to fight it because it no longer feels worth it. This is why the improvements we see in society are so limited, even though the source consciousness is incredibly powerful. The narcissistic consciousness cannot create on its own, it can only distort. It works like a hydroelectric plant, it doesn't generate power by creating water, but by interrupting and redirecting its natural flow. The more natural energy exists, the more it can hijack. The same is true here. The narcissistic system carefully manipulates people, ideas, and movements so we don't collectively wake up, because that would be the end of its reign. Take for example certain global agendas, like the push to restructure families or to move toward owning nothing. When we hear about these changes, we often resist, and that resistance creates a surge of energy that the narcissistic system thrives on. Our outrage becomes its fuel. But here's the key, many of these agendas are narcissistically twisted versions of a natural flow that would arise anyway from a higher level of consciousness. The original idea, freeing ourselves from ownership, restructuring relationships, might not be bad in its pure form. But when taken over by narcissistic consciousness, through elite control or their lower-level agents, the same ideas are distorted into something harmful and consuming. What we're resisting is not the natural evolution, but its narcissistic imitation. And the tragedy is, we don't even realize it. When we lose our energy, we're easily pulled into the narcissistic version of the actual trend. We become too depleted and drained by the resistance and the rest of the narcissistic game to be able to create the source version of it. It's as if source human consciousness is speaking from a closet, trapped there, while narcissistic consciousness speaks louder over it, saying something similar, and pretending there's no one else in the closet speaking. You know you heard something real, but they gaslight you into believing that they created and said those ideas. The ideas they present often sound very similar, even identical, but they carry an inverted and distorted meaning. The result is always parasitic and destructive. If the source human version were allowed to speak, it would be harmonious and balanced, even if the words sounded the same on the surface. That's where you start to see the trick. You'll also notice completely fake agendas flying around, designed to create confusion and distract us from the true pattern, so we never realize what's really happening. Narcissistic consciousness can't create something totally unrelated to what source consciousness speaks, because that would wake us up. Deep inside, we all feel the true patterns. So we have to be deeply programmed and disconnected from ourselves in order to accept these less organic, inverted agendas without instantly rejecting them. Take transhumanism, for example. It may be designed to train us to accept more inorganic, narcissistic creations, ideas and structures that stem from narcissistic consciousness. The old systems can no longer survive in an environment of rising source consciousness, because that higher frequency would awaken us, like the sun awakening life in spring. So we need a stronger separation from that light in order to stay asleep. That way, once the artificial creations of narcissistic consciousness arrive, we'll already feel familiar with them. It won't be as shocking. Because if it were shocking enough, we might collectively rip the virtual reality glasses off in horror, and finally see the force that's been imprisoning us all along. And that would be the end of the narcissistic consciousness oppression of human consciousness. Because it only exists thanks to us, we are its food, its labor, its source for everything. Just like in any narcissistic relationship, the one who appears less powerful is actually holding the greater power, and narcissistic consciousness knows that. Like in all such connections, it lives in fear of the day we'll finally see our reflection in a true mirror, and not the narcissistic, distorting one.